Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks took a breather today after 4 sessions of gains. Investors stayed on the sidelines ahead of key central bank meetings, which we expect this week. Now, trading on Africa's major markets continues to be pretty subdued today. South Africa's JSE lower as Chinese stocks remain under pressure following disappointing economic data from China. Now, we saw banks and platinum miners both sliding over 1% on the day. In Nigeria, large cap stock Dangote Cement as well as cement arrival CCNN were a drag on the market today. Now, also coming up on the show, Egypt's inflation rate falls to 7.5% in August. Italy calls for changes to the European Union budget in order to boost its economy. And we get a taste of South Africa's street food culture at the Kata festival in Soweto. Well, let's kick off today's show in Egypt. The country's annual urban consumer price inflation rate decreased to 7.5% in August. Now, this is the lowest rate in 6 years. August rate falls well below the 9% target, which the Egyptian Central Bank had set for itself for the end of 2020. This, of course, paves the way for another large rate cut in September. The central bank did cut rates by 150 basis points at its last monetary policy committee meeting last month, encouraged by declining inflation rates. Now, Egypt is approaching the end of an IMF-backed economic reform program that saw inflation rise to a high of 33% in 2017. Well, let's delve into these numbers. We're joined now by Yasser Hakim in Cairo. Yasser, always good to have you on the show. Now, we know inflation, it stayed on the decline for a while now, even despite recent cutbacks in subsidies that, of course, risked stoking price increases in the country. Are the effects of those subsidy cuts and energy price reforms over and firmly in Egypt's past?
Well, Uche, it was a test for the Egyptian economy and the central bank when the increase in prices of energy, especially fuel and electricity, took place in July because of the slashing of subsidies on energy. And the central bank waited to see what the reaction will be in the market. Will it be inflationary, as always has happened in the last 5 years? And for the first time, it was not. And the inflation actually did not jump up as expected. And the Egyptian pound actually stayed strong against the dollar, increasing, in fact, in the last 6 months, including the time when the subsidies on energy were slashed. So this obviously is probably due to the economic and rigorous economic reforms, which obviously saw an influx of hard currency into the country, with an improvement in the tourism sector, a main source of hard currency, improvement in the remittances being sent to Egyptians, and as well as improvement in the expenditure and balance of payments, which meant that expenditure has dropped. And all this with the higher supply of products and basic goods, which is how the inflation is being measured in Egypt at the moment. This saw that the prices of these goods has stabilized during that time, causing the inflation to continue on its downward spiral that has been happening in the last few months. And all this encouraged the central bank to cut rates, interest rates, and therefore also this has kept inflation down.
Right. Now, of course, these new numbers have once again encouraged talk of another rate cut, of course, when the central bank meets later this month. What are the expectations, Yasser?
Yes, the next meeting will be on the 26th of September. We expect, obviously, the central bank to keep its eye on inflation rates, on prices, on the exchange rate between the Egyptian pound and the US dollar. Obviously, most experts now and most economists are predicting further cuts in interest rates. The last cut was around 150 basic points. Another 100 basic points are expected in the next meeting, putting prices, the interest rates down to around 12.5 to 13% as expected by the markets here, and this could even go further down at the end of the year.
Now, despite this positive trajectory of Egypt's economy, of course, it is currently the fastest economic growth in the Middle East. We're still seeing the market Egypt Purchasing Managers Index. It's showing that business activity has contracted in all but 2 of the past 12 months, Yasser. So why is business activity in the country seeming to stall?
Well, one of the major reasons is what we're talking about now. You had the interest rates at a high from 20% 2 years ago, and it kept going down until around 15%. At this rate, obviously, interest rate, it leads to investors obviously finding problems in expensive loan services. When you have a high interest rate, you cannot take loans to expand your business. You cannot take loans easily to increase your production. You cannot take loans to open or establish businesses in the first place. So obviously, this has had a negative effect on the businesses environment in Egypt, on FDIs, foreign direct investments, because obviously, whether you're a business or an individual, you'd rather safely put money in the bank and receive from 20 to 15% interest rates, which was less risky and more profitable at the moment. And this has actually led to what we can see now when you say that the businesses have stopped. At the same time, there is the investment law, amendments to the investment law that have been a bit slow in adopting, which the main issues in this law that needs to be addressed, obviously, is not the law itself, but the application of it. And we're talking about red tape, a big problem in Egypt, red tape and bureaucracy. So those two issues, when you have lower interest rates at the moment, like we're seeing at the moment, when you have red tape being slashed, then you can expect to start to see an influx of foreign direct investments, or at least the investments that are in place will manage to expand, to grow, to have more production, to buy more machinery, to increase more production, the cost of production will be less, and therefore you see more investments in the country. So this is one of the reasons why the central bank has been trying to cut interest rates in the last session, and expecting in the next session to try to reinvigorate the market, to try to increase investments and give more opportunity for businesses to increase and to raise production levels. Back to you, Uche.
Well, many thanks, Yasser, for that update and for your insights. Yasser Hakim joining us there in Cairo. Well, let's stay in the country. Egypt is going to be the first in the Middle East and North Africa to store electricity. With Chinese partnership, Egypt will build a new power plant with a capacity to generate about 2,400 megawatts of electricity. Now, the country is planning electrical connectivity projects with Sudan as well as Saudi Arabia. And as Adel El Mahrouri explains, the storage facility will help the country enhance its electrical power management.
Egypt is going to be the first country in the region to have pumped storage power plant. The project will give the nation access to 2.4 gigawatts of clean electric energy. This advanced facility will be constructed in Ataqa Mountain in Suez City, not far from the Suez Canal industrial zone.
It's a huge project. It will introduce new technology to Egypt. The design of the project depends on the geographic nature of the location. It can't just be implemented anywhere. In Ataka Mountain, there is a natural water reserve. There are only 2 countries in Africa who have similar technology. Egypt's project, however, is going to be the 4th biggest in the world.
The concept of hydroelectric storage is quite simple. Excessive electricity produced in the country would be used to power pumps, which would lift the water to a specific elevation. And then when needed, the water would be allowed to fall back down, turning turbines and producing additional electric power. 8 million cubic meters of water will be stored in the natural enclave of the mountain, all from recycled sewers water. China's Sinohydro has been entrusted with this $2.6 billion project, which is expected to be completed by the year 2026.
Sinohydro is a big company in that field. It's a state-owned company, so we have a lot of trust in it. The project is huge. It has 6 kilometers of tunnels, so safety and environmental impact are crucial. All our consultants have confidence that Sinohydro is a perfect fit for it.
Egypt's Hydropower Plant Executive Authority is currently finalizing its preliminary technical and geophysical studies for the Ataka project. The government is also studying the feasibility to build 2 more pumped storage power plants to absorb the entire excessive electric power it has. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And now look at our corporate headlines for the day. The Competition Tribunal of South Africa has ruled that AB InBev's regional unit, South Africa Breweries, will be given the exclusive license for the manufacture, distribution, marketing and sale of Guinness as well as Smirnoff drinks. Now, though South Africa is a small market for Guinness Stout, Africa is a major market for the drink. Diageo's main focus of the SAB deal is Smirnoff, which accounts for about 10% of South Africa's flavored alcoholic beverage market. And South Africa's Independent Communications Authority has fined MTN $341 million for its decision to triple the price of its WhatsApp data bundles. Now, ICASA's Complaints and Compliance Committee says the firm had knowingly contravened regulations and brought problems for itself. That's after a move to introduce a monthly WhatsApp bundle in 2018, which resulted in WhatsApp usage on the network increasing by 300% in 8 weeks. And China's Shenzhen Transsion Holdings is planning an initial public offering on Shanghai's Nasdaq-style Star Board. The firm plans to raise about $423 million by issuing as many as 80 million A shares in the IPO. It will set the price on September 17th. Now, proceeds will be used to pay for mobile phone manufacturing-based projects and research and development. Of course, the firm now claims a 48.7% market share of Africa's smartphone market. And Saudi Aramco's chief executive, Amin Nasser, says the oil giant's initial public offering will take place very soon, with a primary listing on its home market of Riyadh. The group is working on plans to float a 1% stake on Riyadh's Tadwal later this year. It could also list another 1% stake in 2020. The flotation is crucial to raise money for Crown Prince Mohammed's plans to diversify the Saudi economy. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a quick break now. Here's a look at what's still to come. The World Bank forecasts a 2.9% growth rate for Somalia this year. And a ratings agency, Moody's, sees some life in South Africa's investment potential.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Naro.
This
Well, of course.
is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, the World Bank has projected that Somalia's economy will grow by 2.9% this year from 2.8% last year. Now, this is positive news for an economy that has been ravaged by conflict. The World Bank did warn, however, that the higher growth forecast for the next 3 to 5 years would depend on the country being able to sustain its current economic reform momentum. Well, Abdulaziz Bilo now joins us in Mogadishu to give us a better picture of the situation on ground. Abdulaziz, always great to have you on the show. Now, as we just said there, the World Bank did stress that this higher growth forecast will largely depend on the government's ability to sustain the current economic reforms. Now, looking at the state's fiscal position right now and, of course, its implementation, a track record of some of its projects, what does the picture look like in the near term?
Well, Uche, the Somali government here has welcomed the recent comments and the recent report by World Bank, and they see it as an endorsement to the years of financial progress that the government and the initiatives, financial initiatives that the government has initiated. So this is an overall endorsement to the Somali government, the fact that the economy has increased even though it's just by a small margin. Now, one of the key factors that World Bank also mentioned in this report of the growing economy is the fact that the country has increased its internal revenue, and how it has achieved this is by increasing taxation, and it has increased taxation as of last year by 29%. Now, Uche, the issue of taxation has been so controversial here in Somalia. Locals have been questioning why they're paying taxes to the government, yet they're not getting the right services. So the government is of the view that the only way that the Somali economy can be boosted is by increasing the taxation bracket, and this is why it has increased the more pressure on the business community to pay taxes to contribute in the revival of the country's economy, and that's why it has increased by 29%. Even in the first quarter of 2018, the Somali government recorded close to $42 million in the first 4 months from the port of Mogadishu alone. So this was a big boost for the Somali government, and one that convinced the international community that the Somali government is keen on reviving its economy, and through this it is increasing taxation. That's why it has created this momentum. And one thing also to note is the fact that despite the months of challenges from the business community, the Somali government says that it will provide all these services, including education, healthcare, from the funds that it has received from taxation.
Right, Abdulaziz, but there's still quite a long list of risks that the country still faces. Some of them are, of course, a lack of human capital development, as the World Bank pointed to, climate change, poverty, but particularly worrying is, of course, the fragile state of security in the country. With AMISOM troops scheduled to leave in 2021, has the security situation improved enough for us to be confident about the future of this growth numbers?
Well, Uche, that's a very important point. Security is very paramount to a thriving economy in any country, and security has become a thorny issue here in Somalia. We have two militant groups, ISIL and Al-Shabaab, battling for control here, threatening the business community. So overall, the situation in terms of security is gradually improving compared to past years with the presence of AMISOM. And in recent months also, we have witnessed the Somali National Army that is supposed to take over from AMISOM doing a very commendable job in terms of liberating, and not just liberating, but also holding some towns and villages in southern Somalia that were very critical to Al-Shabaab's operations. These towns include Barire in the Lower Shabelle, as well as the town of Odigle, also in Lower Shabelle. It has also managed to push out the Al-Shabaab from regions in Middle Shabelle regions. Now, these two regions are adjacent to Mogadishu and very vital to the security of the capital. So the Somali forces who are supposed to replace AMISOM have managed to capture these towns and hold them from Al-Shabaab, and that's why the Somali government has now signed a multi-million-dollar deal with the state of Qatar, actually $200 million to be precise, for the renovation of a 120-kilometer stretch of road linking Mogadishu to Lower and Middle Shabelle regions. These are two regions that are very critical to the production of Somalia in terms of agriculture, which is also part of the Somali economy, source of revenue rather for the Somali government. So these roads will be reopened, and there will be free flow of movement. That's what the government of Somalia hopes to achieve, so that it can boost trade and movement of people from one region to another.
Now, we just talked about Egypt's immense economic progress on the back of an IMF reform program. One thing the World Bank says about Somalia is the potential that normalizing relations with international financial institutions such as the IMF could pose to boosting Somalia's economy. Where is Somalia with these relations right now?
Well, Uche, as we're speaking right now, the Minister of Finance and his delegation are in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, meeting with top IMF officials to gauge the progress that Somalia has made in terms of financial gains. So one of the key areas that the Somali government now is focusing on is arrears clearance. So the international community expects Somalia to pay $5 billion in terms of debt that accumulated over the years from the civil war that happened. And so for the Somali government to be able to receive grants and a loan from the World Bank, the Somali government has to show that it is creating financial progress here in the country. And that's why the recent engagement by IMF, World Bank, including the European Union, has become a major booster, game changer here for Somalia. In recent months, the World Bank and the World Bank has begun providing assistance to Somalia in terms of grants. Close to $80 million was given to the Somali government this year alone, making it the first major payment by the international body to Somalia. So this is a major progress for the Somali government, as well as IMF is also assisting the Somali government in financial recovery, and it's going to help Somalia in printing new currency for the first time in 30 years. So the Somali government, through the Minister of Finance, is saying that these recent engagements and the visit by IMF and World Bank officials to Somalia is a major boost for financial growth here in Somalia. And also we have witnessed more funding funding from the European Union being channeled to the Somali government. And before, this funding were used to be given to donor community through the UN and other multilateral agencies. But now we are seeing these international bodies injecting these funds directly to the Somali government. So the future of Somalia looks bright from this point of view. But there's also the challenge of a militant group, Al-Shabaab, that is also threatening the country's business community by imposing more restrictions and more taxation so that it can be able to sustain its operations. So the issue of security must be guaranteed so that the business community and other investors can be able to come to Somalia and invest and boost the economy.
Well, the outlook certainly seems cautiously optimistic. Many thanks for your insights, Abdulaziz. Of course, that's Abdulaziz Bilo joining us there in Mogadishu. Well, let's move on now to South Africa. The country needs to get its house in order to keep its investment rating intact. Credit ratings agency Moody's is the only one of the big three to rate the sovereign as a viable investment destination. While CGTN's Angelo Coppola attended the agency's briefing on forecasts for sub-Saharan Africa and filed this report.
South Africa's investment grade rating is safe for now, but it will remain dependent on the pace of policy reforms over the next 2 years. Economic growth remains stunted though, and fiscal risks are mounting from lower tax revenue and continued bailouts of state entities.
We have to wait for the MTBPS to see what's going to be the fiscal deficit that the National Treasury is going to present, the level of debt and the response to the additional costs from Eskom support. Another big, I think, policy piece that we will be watching out is, an official strategic plan for Eskom to bring it to a stable financial position.
South Africa escaped a technical recession with a 3.1% turnaround in growth in the second quarter of 2019. But business confidence remains low and productivity is subdued.
We are hoping that production will steady at least, hoping that we won't have a platinum disruption because of the negotiations. But we've virtually recovered from the dip of the first quarter. So we're back at where we were. But if you take the second quarter and you compare it with the second quarter of last year, it's -2 and a bit.
South Africa's inability to grow the economy, create jobs or reduce inequality needs swift policy action. Moody's has the country rated one notch above junk status with a stable outlook.
But if at some point even this prospect of a gradual policy response were to fade, then we would likely take the view that the economic and fiscal deterioration are there to stay for the next years to come. And that could trigger a change, a negative action.
In other parts of the continent, the picture is more positive. Despite a global slowdown in growth, sub-Saharan Africa is still home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world.
Certain regions growing at a very fast pace. East Africa, for instance, Kenya and the region is registering quite high level of growth. And another region that we flagged as a high growth rate region is the West French-speaking Economic and Monetary Union, so Ivory Coast and Senegal.
GDP growth expectations for the continent are sitting at around 4% on average. Meanwhile, down in South Africa, we're languishing at 1.5%, and it's unlikely to improve anytime soon. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Sandton, South Africa.
Well, let's turn to Kenya now, where the drought and food security situation continues to deteriorate. The National Drought Management Authority says about 2.6 million people are currently facing acute food shortages. While CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy visited Turkana, one of the most affected regions, and brings us the details.
Kenya faces a new humanitarian crisis with 2.6 million people reportedly threatened by severe hunger. Those in need of relief assistance has more than doubled from 1.1 million in February this year, with the number expected to rise above 3 million people by October. At least 11 counties have been affected as the drought and hunger situation gets worse. Selina Aripon is a 25-year-old mother of 4 and a resident of Akwanya village in Lodwar. Her family is among thousands of people currently trying to cope with the devastating effects of climate change. Sitting in the shade of a tree with her family, Aripon struggles to weave brooms to make ends meet. Aripon earns less than $1 for a day's work, laboring for her children's survival. Much of our proceeds is spent on food and other necessities for our family.
I try my best to buy food for my children out of what I earn. I also use part of my savings as hospital bills when my children get sick, pay school fees and also buy some clothes for myself.
A few kilometers from Akwanya, a group of 30 women have come together under the Kak Wanyang Women Group to save money for emergencies and basic needs in an attempt to avert the devastating effects of the raging hunger. But these women can only do so much.
My role is to help them, or now they save this money. My role is to record them. My role is to teach them that this is the way to go with the business, the way to capture the anger.
This group of 30 women are the beacon of hope, not just in Kak Wanyang, a community close to Lodwar town in Turkana County, but beyond. The largest saving this day was $9, but the women are free to take out loans from this pool, depending on their immediate needs. This is not just a dry spell. Between March and June, rainfall reached less than half the average rate. Many of these women have seen their harvests run down by delayed rains, rendering them helpless. The United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund's recent allocation of $5 million to complement Kenya's Hunger Safety Net program could bring a ray of hope to many, since it targets mainly parts of the arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya, which are hard hit by drought. Hundreds of thousands of people in Kenya's Turkana County remain in dire need of humanitarian assistance due to the prolonged drought that has left many in need of food. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Lodwar, Kenya.
Now, you'll remember we reported on Nigeria closing its land borders in order to stop illegal smuggling of rice into the country. Well, the government now says that rice smuggling is threatening plans to achieve its food sufficiency. CGTN's Philly Haza looks at the implications of illegal smuggling commodities from Abuja.
Hassan Ibrahim has farmed rice locally as a source of livelihood for 13 years now. He says he has had tough times financially because people don't buy much of the local rice he produces.
I make very little profits from my rice farm because many people here still prefer imported rice, most of which is smuggled into the country.
Nigeria produces about 4 million metric tons of rice yearly, which is short of the over 7 million metric tons it consumes annually. To boost local production, the government placed a ban on imported rice 3 years ago and set a target to be self-sufficient in rice production by the year 2020. However, according to the Rice Processors Association of Nigeria, over 20 million bags of foreign rice is smuggled into Nigeria every 3 months. In August, the government decided to close its land borders to stop the smuggling of rice into the country.
By the time the border is closed now, definitely, even we can have foreign investments in the aspect of what? Rice production. But they stop them. Those, entrepreneurs in other countries that are exporting this rice to Nigeria, they can come in here to establish their own farm, establish their own factories, and still produce this rice. Since they have already stopped their product from coming in.
There are lots of prospective rice buyers at the market, but many of them say the quality of some brands of local rice are below expectation.
We need the government to do more to improve local rice, because a lot of people prefer to buy our domestic rice, but they say foreign rice is better processed than the local one in the market.
If we can do more in the area of refining it, do more in the area of destoning it, why not? I prefer the Nigerian rice because it is nutritious.
The Nigeria government, in partnership with the United Nations FAO, have started training selected local rice farmers in order to ensure they produce the right quality of rice for the country.
Nigeria may be on its way to becoming self-sufficient in rice production, and experts say that's a good step in boosting Africa's largest economy, creating more revenue for the government and lifting millions of its citizens out of poverty. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
You're watching Global Business Africa, and here's what's coming up after this short break. Italy calls for changes to the European Union budget in order to boost its economy. And after 20 years at the helm, Alibaba's co-founder Jack Ma steps down.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed, and this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city centre.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, on the international front, Italy is seeking a reform of European Union budget rules in order to foster economic recovery. The country's Prime Minister, Conte, says Italy wants more EU investments in Africa. It also asked Italian politicians and citizens to stop using slogans against or in favor of migration.
Some objectives are already clear. We want to change and review the Stability and Growth Pact, and we want to ensure that these European rules help growth and, most of all, sustainable development in Italy and the whole of Europe. We want Europe to invest more in the African continent. It is unthinkable that Europe invests a much less substantial measure than the one China is investing in Africa.
And turning our attention to Brexit, the UK government has failed in a second bid to hold a general election intended to break the deadlock in a parliament. Now, the vote came in before parliament was officially prorogued or suspended for 5 weeks. Here's CGTN's Kitty Logan with more.
Only possible explanation.
A second government attempt to set a snap election sparked a furious debate. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn says he doesn't trust the Prime Minister.
We are not prepared to risk inflicting the disaster of no deal on us, our communities, our jobs, our services, or indeed our rights.
And without Labour Party's support, the vote failed again.
The ayes to the right, 293, the noes to the left.
With Parliament now suspended for 5 weeks, there will be no election before the Brexit deadline of October 31st. It leaves Boris Johnson trapped in a minority government.
They want the British Prime Minister to go to a vital negotiation without the power to walk away. They want to delay Brexit.
It's the final blow in a series of defeats delivered by cross-party MPs opposed to a no-deal Brexit. And a bill to prevent a no-deal Brexit passed by Parliament last week became law on Monday. That effectively forces the government to request a Brexit extension should there be no new deal negotiated with the EU by mid-October. Earlier, on a visit to Ireland, Boris Johnson said he can deliver a new Brexit deal in time.
Of course, we must get Brexit done because the UK must come out
on October the 31st, by October the 31st, or else I fear that permanent damage will be done in the UK to trust in our democratic system.
But the warm welcome in Dublin did little to conceal fundamental differences between the two leaders. Boris Johnson wants the backstop, a measure to prevent a hard border with Ireland, removed from any new agreement with the EU. But no backstop, no deal, says Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar.
We must protect the peace and also the burgeoning all-island economy. And that's why for us the backstop continues to be a critical component of the withdrawal agreement, unless and until alternatives are found. But we are open to alternatives, but they must be realistic ones, legally binding and workable, and we haven't received such proposals to date.
Morning, Home Secretary. Morning.
That view was echoed by Amber Rudd as she resigned from Boris Johnson's cabinet on Sunday. She accused the Prime Minister of putting more effort into leaving without a deal than with one. Boris Johnson still has strong backing from Brexit supporters, angry that Parliament hasn't delivered on the 2016 referendum. But solidarity shown by MPs opposed to a no deal has prevented the Prime Minister keeping control over his Brexit promises. Boris Johnson says he'd rather die in a ditch than not complete Brexit by the end of October. But that could put him on a collision course not only with MPs, but also with the law. Kitty Logan, CGTN, Westminster.
Now, the co-founder and CEO of e-commerce giant Alibaba is stepping down. Last year, Jack Ma announced he would retire on his 55th birthday. While CGTN's Gerald Tan takes a look at his extraordinary career and what lies ahead for China's richest man.
A superstar of Chinese e-commerce, Jack Ma defies conventions. His playful image, like this Michael Jackson-style performance at a company celebration, runs counter to stereotypical CEOs. Yet his journey from English teacher to tech tycoon is one of modern China's best-known success stories. In 1999, Ma co-founded a business marketplace webpage out of his apartment in his hometown Hangzhou. Fast forward 20 years and Alibaba is a global empire, spanning online retail, cloud computing, digital banking, even entertainment. Success, though, didn't come easy for Ma. He failed his college entrance exam twice, got turned down by Harvard University 10 times, and was rejected for 30 jobs after graduation. The no's kept coming when he sought venture capital to back his internet enterprises. But his favorite movie character inspired him to carry on.
That is why when people call me crazy, stupid in the past 17 years, you're crazy, you're doing something that never work. You're stupid, how can you do that model? Amazon this model, eBay this model, why Alibaba this model? I told myself, Forrest Gump said, go ahead. Never care about what the other people.
The investors who said no may now be looking back with regret. Alibaba is a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, boasting more than 720 million active users each month. The company is often credited with helping to transform the Chinese economy by giving choice to consumers in rural areas, unlocking the domestic buying power, and spurring the growth of countless small businesses. In 2014, Alibaba shattered records at the New York Stock Exchange. Its initial public offering raised $25 billion, a feat unheard of before or since.
Mr. Ma, good morning, sir.
As the face of Alibaba, Ma lives in the limelight, meeting world leaders, speaking at global forums, and sharing his opinions on a multitude of topics.
Trade war is the most stupid thing in this world. China, young people, the children are always the kings and the queens. We have to make them to work like a team.
Ma says he would like to focus on his charities once he steps down as CEO of Alibaba. He's also expressed interest in returning to education where he had his beginning, coming full circle for the man whom many in China respectfully refer to as Teacher Ma. Gerald Tan, CGTN, Washington.
And now let's turn to the U.S. Fashionistas are strutting their stuff at the New York Fashion Week. One show featured 4 emerging Chinese designers who showcased collections inspired by different Chinese dynasties. They're all part of ICY, which is an e-commerce platform in China that partners with designers in a unique copyright sharing model and helps them grow their brands through marketing. Here's Karina Huber with their story.
4 Chinese dynasties were represented at the ICY show at New York Fashion Week. The collection by designer Li Xia focused on the women of the Tang Dynasty, a period spanning the 7th to 10th centuries.
Women from Tang Dynasty is more about open-minded. They have very clear position from like Asian women. So there's a strong connection between my brand and the Asian women from Tang Dynasty.
The garments were for the bold, colorful, whimsical, and youthful. Designer Eva Chu showcased a completely different look for her brand, All Comes From Nothing. It was a chic and elegant collection with muted greens and blues, beiges and blacks and golds. The inspiration was the last Chinese imperial dynasty, the Qing dynasty, that ended in 1912.
My favorite time and space is actually the last empire, Shanghai. That's why I have this Shanghai themed tee. It also looks like those Chinese character, but it's in English.
The 4 Chinese designers showcased at this New York runway show have all collaborated with ICY, a Chinese online platform that helps emerging designers manufacture their garments at an attractive price point and grow their market.
The site currently has partnerships with around 400 brands. All the clothing sold through the platform is made by ICY's own factories in China. The company has also teamed up with influential bloggers who help promote the brands on their site. The CEO says they focus on emerging designers because Chinese consumers are increasingly looking for something unique.
The new generations, the new consumers are totally different from the past. They think clothing, dressing is a way they express themselves.
Designer Li Xia has her own factory in Shanghai and makes many of her higher-priced garments there, but says it still makes sense for her to work with ICY.
We do a collaboration about 20 commercial pieces. We can sell in a more commercial-like price. And it's also a very good opportunity for young designers to balance the commercial part and the creative part.
ICY currently only features Chinese designers and is only available to Chinese consumers. But Ying wants to attract foreign designers and open the market for Chinese brands as well.
I hope ICY, in the future, ICY can help different designers from different countries to express their own culture.
The runway show in New York is part of that strategy to take the platform global. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
Well, let's shift focus now and take a look at commodity prices today. Oil futures rose slightly to their highest levels in almost 6 weeks. Now, behind these gains is optimism that OPEC and other producing countries may agree to extend output cuts in order to support prices. Meanwhile, gold dropped to a near 1-month low today to hold below that key $1,500 per ounce level. Prices, of course, were hit by a stronger dollar and an improved appetite for riskier assets, which, of course, was supported by the hope of a global economic stimulus from central banks. Well, let's take a quick break now, still to come. We get a taste of South Africa's street food culture at the Kata festival in Soweto. And we introduce you to a company that is at your service for skilled professionals.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, thousands of South Africans gathered in Soweto recently to celebrate the country's popular street food culture. The Kata festival is one of several activities taking place across the country during Heritage Month. Well, CGTN's Julie Shire was there for us and filed this report.
Kata Masters pulled out all the stops as more than 10,000 people turned up on the first day of the Kata festival in South Africa. A kata is a hollowed-out portion of bread stuffed with scrumptious fillings and the nostalgic flavor of home.
It's something that originates from the hood. Yeah, that's why we're celebrating kata, because we grew up eating kata and now it's something so big that we have events on katas.
They normally put a steak, sometimes a fish and chips, especially when they've got acha or sauce, extra sauce, then it's nice. I'm looking something different.
Chefs got creative with the offerings from traditional katas to the more gourmet-style dishes.
Our kata is special because it represents, I feel like it's got the soul of South Africa. I mean, it's not often that you get a kata with liver, and it's not often that you get a kata with inhliziyo, which is heart. So it's sort of like the color of it's like it's got every color there. So it's like a representation of South Africa.
So every time I'm at the location, I always feel left out. I'm like, I want to eat this, but what can I do to change this so that they can introduce something that I can also eat? So I introduce hake. So yeah, basically that's what the reason why I'm here today is to make sure that everyone gets used to the seafood in the location.
Festival goers were undeterred by the snaking queues to get their hands on some Kasi food.
I'm hoping for the best kata because everyone's here, so I'm hoping this is the best one because, you know, where the wind blows, we go.
Kata is a soul food. Actually, we always advise people to come. You must not eat anything when you come to the festival because once you have that kata, then you will be satisfied. Your soul will be good.
Try a little bit. Let us know what it's like.
It's good. Very good.
It's not just an opportunity to showcase delicious township food. It gives small businesses a chance to grow and expand their market. Julie Shire, CGTN, Soweto, South Africa.
Meanwhile, in Nigeria, getting skilled and reliable professionals in the country can prove to be a difficult task. But a digital human resource company called At Your Service is now changing that narrative by verifying, training and aggregating professionals on a single platform. While CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports on the system that is not only empowering thousands of Nigerians, but also satisfying employers.
It's been a busy month for Benjamin Meke, whose business involves extra low voltage installations covering fire alarms and CCTV cameras. Previously, it was tough to get business despite advertising on social media. But since enrolling on the At Your Service platform, his business has been booming.
It's been
way better. I think it's more than 3 times what we used to get. And I think also, apart from the monetary value, we also got a lot of exposure. That's very key and is invaluable.
And the service has also benefited many business owners like Felix Ofungo, who had found it quite challenging getting skilled professionals for employment.
It's really been fantastic. Like I said, it's different from any other service we've tried in Nigeria. I started using at your service on a personal basis initially, but I have since expanded my use of the service to even my company. So we get a lot of professionals through at your service on a corporate basis now, not just on a personal basis.
The digital human resource company is the brainchild of Uche Okoronkwo. The company rigorously screens and verifies anyone seeking to enroll on the platform. The idea is to improve access to efficient workforce and reduce unemployment. And it's a service that's speedily gaining traction.
Currently, we have over 10,000, 11,000 at the moment, but the number continues to increase. We're seeing professionals, artisans, freelancers, and very recently we're seeing even students, undergraduates who are seeking internship positions. We're seeing all kinds of people come on board. And these are people in Nigeria, in Ghana, West Africa, and recently we are seeing more interest also from people in East Africa as well. And we continue to empower as many people as we can. I mean, the more people see value in what's at your service, the more they refer their friends, and more people continue to join the platform. So,
Nigeria's unemployment rate is currently at 23.1%, and the National Bureau of Statistics projects that it would rise to 33.5% by 2020. The government has embarked on several interventions to reduce the rate of unemployment, and it's expected that platforms like At Your Service could help government's intervention. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, before we go, a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand stronger in a third day of gains. Like other emerging market currencies, it has had a slight reprieve as no new threats on tariffs have been made in that US-China trade war. Also, looser monetary policies in major economies is unlikely as global growth concerns grow, and that has lifted sentiment a bit. Meanwhile, Kenya shilling strengthening against the dollar, supported by tightening liquidity in the local money markets and reduced dollar demand from oil importers. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me,